quit looking to him for answers and start looking to the horse.
What if the greatest horsemen weren't defined by their techniques, but by their ability to truly understand the horse? In this episode, we pick up where we left off with the legendary Martin Black, continuing our deep dive into the legacies of two of the most influential figures in horsemanship, Tom Dorrance and Ray Hunt. Through Martin's stories, we get a glimpse into what made them so remarkable. From Tom's quiet, instinctive way with horses to Ray's sharp, determined approach to teaching. Their philosophies, shaped by experience and the mentors before them, left an undeniable mark on horsemanship, and their words still resonate today. We also reflect on what it means to be a great horseman, the value of feel and timing, the lessons that come from unexpected places, and how the horse world continues to evolve. We're diving back in where I tell Martin about a conversation I had with our good friend at Noel Floyd, Tick Maynard, where I asked him if he could talk to Martin about anything, what would it be? He said, well, Martin is like our connection to the past. He's like straddled between the past and the present. And I would say by this book, the future. When I say that, and we talk a little bit about two men who are probably two of the most quotable, despite my best efforts, and two incredibly quotable men, can I ask you what you learned the most from both of them individually?
From Tom, definitely more of a mindset, how to think. It wasn't so much about tricks to get horses to do things. I mean, yeah, there was a lot of tools and technique I learned, but it was more about, mind control and, the way you look at a horse, things like that.
Do you think he had that naturally, or do you think he mentored that within himself over time?
I don't know that I know exactly what a genius is, but I would say Tom was one of the few people I've been around that I would say was completely on a different wavelength.
Really?
Yeah.
Why do you say that?
Because he's just so different.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Like behaviorally?
Mm-hmm.
And do you think that's why he was so gifted with horses?
Mm-hmm. So he was youngest growing up. And all the other siblings left home. And he stayed home with the parents until they died. And then, long story shorter, they sold the ranch. He went on about his business. He wasn't married, 50-some years old, never left home. I don't even know how much he even left the ranch.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I know he went and visited his brothers and blah, blah, blah. But, and don't quote me on this, but I don't think he went in the military. I don't think he worked for the neighbors. I don't know how many times he packed a suitcase overnight even, let alone pack his war bag and not be back for however long.
Right.
Now, I mean, I know he went to Nevada and, he'd spend a month, but he always would come back to the ranch there. To my knowledge, it wasn't until they sold the ranch that he cleaned up everything and moved and left. So he's basically home alone. I mean, his parents were there, but I think they were pretty old before they died. So, I mean, he was doing a lot of things by himself. And he was very capable about doing things by himself. And I think that was kind of a challenge that he enjoyed, is how do I get this done by myself?
Yeah.
Bill Dorrance, his brother, told the story that he went to visit him at the ranch and see the parents or whatever. And they had these purebred cattle, Hereford cattle. And they had tattoos so they could identify them, number, tattoos. And Bill noticed that a lot of the cows didn't have tattoos. And I'm like, Tom, what's going on here? We're supposed to be able to identify the cows. Tom said, well, I just memorized them. Like 400 or 500 cows. All red and white cows.
Wow.
Not like they got all these different color patterns. I mean, they're not exactly the same. But anyway, Bill says, no, you can't have this many cows memorized. Just catch any one you want, and I'll tell you what her tattoo is. Excuse me. They was tattooing them and not ear tagging them.
Okay.
So you couldn't see until you caught them. That's what it was.
And he said he could identify.
He could tell you what the tattoo number was, but you had to look inside the ear to get it.
Oh, wow.
Instead of putting an ear tag that you could see from however far away.
He memorized all 500 tags.
Yeah.
Or numbers. So, that's amazing.
After about the fourth or fifth one that Bill caught, and Tom recited what the ear tag was, as Bill was looking at it, like, maybe you do have memorized.
Wow.
So, I mean, is that genius? I don't know what genius is.
That's something.
But,
that's something.
I mean, he had a memory like nobody I know.
So it sounds, someone who sees things differently, does things differently, tends to contribute to doing things differently. Why do you think Tom is such a quotable, such a referenced person in horsemanship?
Well, he's seen things different than what a lot of people today see it. I think there was more people in his generation and prior that lined up with his way of thinking. In other words, before the mechanized revolution. But when we get into recreation riders, basically town people buy their first horse, and they're easier to impress. Okay, so I don't think the average, pick any number you want, 40-year-old in the 1880s was as easy to impress as what your average 40-year-old is today.
Oh, interesting.
That didn't grow up around
horses.
You could not walk down the street in the 1890s without it being littered with horses.
Yeah.
Even if you didn't do anything with horses.
They were around everywhere.
You knew they would run over you if you got in front of them.
Yeah.
I mean, there was just a lot of people. There was a lot of things that people knew about horses that didn't have anything to do with horses. And today they don't have that. Not near like then. But then you take, people like my family that raised horses. That was their life. By the time they was practically born, old enough to even acknowledge anything, well, they was riding a horse probably in front of the saddle with their dad or mom. And every generation, I can show you pictures of every generation. Here you got your baby in the saddle with you. I'm proud of my baby.
You showed me videos. It's amazing.
Yes.
Very young kids, like very, very young. They're in the saddle long, like even almost the same time they're walking. It's unbelievable. And I think what's amazing about your family is also that not only are you 8 generations back, but from my understanding, all those horses that you guys were breeding, those lines of horses, there was lines of horses that you guys had, right? That followed the generations. So you had like the granddaughter of a horse that you rode is like being ridden by a grandkid of yours, like simplified there, but
the broodmare, my personal brood mares, I traded some mares out of Charlie Van Norman when I was in high school. Those original, and then I started them, rode them a little bit, and then put them in a breeding program. Those horses, I'd say over half my mares today still go back to those original horses. I just kept putting different stallions on them, getting fillies out of and then those became brood mares, and you just keep changing stallions every so often.
Yeah, but you keep the mares.
You keep that line. And, not to get into the breeding program too much, but you say, why don't you bring in new ones? I would bring in new ones, and I wouldn't be happy with them. Some, but, I mean, most of the mares that aren't that original line, they still go back to horses I had 40 years ago.
Wow. So what about Ray? He's this super quotable person in the horse world. Why do you think he's so quotable? And they're two very different men, right? Often put together, but very different.
Ray put a lot of effort in how to teach. And these catchy little quotes was part of his gig.
Yeah.
He was good. Tom had a few, but I don't think Tom put the effort that Ray did into reaching people. Tom was really shy. Ray had a real abruptness to him, and if you don't like it, get out of my way kind of a deal. And you know, he was real abrupt and somewhat abrasive. That abrasiveness, that being hard to reach, kind of made people want to reach him.
Ah, yeah. And that's there's a psychology there.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'm talking out of school here, but I think there's part of that is what was an attraction to Ray. I mean, his horsemanship definitely, but to try to reach. I mean, there's plenty of good horsemen, but why do you take this guy over this guy? It's not always just for the horsemanship. But he did put a lot of effort into how to reach people, like with these quotes, and you know, well, they're not getting it this way. Maybe I'll present it that way. You know, he put a lot of. I think he lost a lot of sleep on how to teach the lesson the next day.
There's an entertainment value to lessons, especially if you're being watched. So
yeah, and Ray never got into that so much as some of these, you know, more modern people. I mean, that's a big entertainment factor with some people.
Yeah, for sure.
But Ray had this other thing going, I think, that made him interesting. And I mean, Ray could get it done. He was not, I mean, I don't care how good a cowboy he was. You could challenge Ray Hunt to anything and he'll probably show you up.
Really?
Yes. It didn't matter for working cows or roping or whatever. I mean, he was a very good student to a lot of good old time horsemen and cowboys before he ever met Tom. And I mean, he could get it done. He was very capable. You know, anywhere you want to put him around on the ranch and driving a tractor or anything else. So there was that part of him that was really confident, which is easy to follow somebody that's really confident, right?
Sure. Just like horses.
Yeah. And so for a lot of reasons, you know, Ray Hunt was Ray Hunt. And a lot of people wish they was Ray Hunt and they claim to be like Ray Hunt. I don't see it. I mean, Ray Hunt had something about him that not a lot of, well, I don't know. I won't say that other people I know don't have those traits, but of the people that, you know, claim to have what Ray had, I don't know, we're looking at different things.
Well, and when you encourage, I mean, you have helped thousands, I can't even imagine how many people you've clinicked across countries, across disciplines. We're going to talk a bit about that. Like, don't you think the individual horse person should try to be themselves rather than try to be someone else? Definitely.
I don't think Ray tried to be Tom Dorrance.
Right.
Tom Dorrance was a different person. He was very shy. He had to work to be comfortable around like a crowd of people. I mean, I'm not saying he didn't love people. He was very compassionate. But to a group of people, he wasn't. It was quite a few years before he was comfortable, like doing a clinic.
Yeah.
Ray, on the other hand, I mean, he hit the ground running, and you know.
Yeah.
But Ray showed horses. He was a good showman. You know, before he met Tom, you know, he won some big competitions on the West Coast, and you know, I mean, he wasn't. You couldn't intimidate him. I don't care what you done. He'd just get abrasive and stand up like that.
Scrappy.
Like a boxer.
Yeah.
I mean, he had that air to him.
Yeah.
You know?
And people are endeared. You're either endeared by that or you're drawn to it.
Yeah.
But like that kind of scrappy, like
Tom, I never seen that in Tom. Tom was just soft and mellow, and you know, if he would just shut down and turn away if somebody wanted to challenge him, he didn't have time for it. He wouldn't even go there. He'd brag on the person and say, I really like your shoes or something else, and diffuse it. But he wouldn't challenge anybody. Ray was real quick to challenge.
Yeah.
Don't throw your hat down in front of Ray, you know.
Really?
Yeah. So they were quite opposite personality-wise in a lot of ways.
What would be the most overarching lesson you got from Ray?
Ray had really good timing. And actually, another one of my mentors is Melvin Jones. And everybody I mean, I observed it, but everybody commented that knew Melvin about what timing he had. And I asked Ray's first wife, Millie, here recently, who was Ray's mentor before Tom Dorrance come into the picture? Because he was mid-30s or something before he met Tom. And she said, and I kind of knew this, but she said Melvin Jones. Well, I knew Melvin and Ray had worked together and they're good friends, and, you know, being around Melvin quite a bit. You know, I heard a lot of Ray Hunt stories from Melvin, you know, out when they was out working on horses and, you know, cowboy stories and whatever. So I knew there was that connection, but I thought, you know, there's a lot of Ray's life during that time in California and stuff I'm not real sure of. So I asked her, and she said, yeah, it was Melvin. Because Melvin showed horses. He's a good hand. He worked at the TS Ranch in Nevada with my Uncle Paul. And there was a lot of good horsemanship came out of that ranch. And that's another conversation, how that all evolved. But that was Ray's first ranch job.
TS.
Is at the TS Ranch in Battle Mountain, Nevada. And Melvin had been there for like 10 years, or in that area at least for 10 years or whatever prior to that. And if you wanted to learn horsemanship, that was the place to go.
Why?
There was a guy from California, Mojave, had ranches down there, him and his brother. And they come up and bought this 5,000 head ranch in Battle Mountain called the TS Ranch. This guy's name was Roland Hill. He's listed in the Arnold Rojas books as being one of the top horsemen in California, you know, back in the day. I mean, we're talking in the early part of the century. And he come up there and bought that ranch. And long story shorter, my granddad's brother was his cow boss. He come to Bruno and hired him as his cow boss. And of course, he hired a lot of young kids around Bruno that he knew, relatives, a lot of them, to go down and work for him. Because my uncle didn't like being around people that drank, and there was, you know, a lot of cowboys drink. You know?
Yep.
So he'd rather hire kids and family and stuff that didn't drink, or at least was responsible if they did. And so that's how the Jones boys and a lot of the people from Bruno ended up down there. And that's where Ray come from. He grew up in that area, and he ended up down at the TS. So anyway, that's where Ray ended up with that. And, you know, he learned all this other horsemanship from other people there, and he went back and forth to California and Nevada, wherever he, you know, could find a good job. He actually worked for Gene Lewis at the Horseshoe Ranch, which borders the TS for a while.
Oh, goody. So we get to talk about Gene.
So Gene Lewis was running the jumping horse program, and the general manager for the ranch, we'll get into Gene in a minute, but Ray worked for him as a cow boss. So, I mean, Ray was all over the map. He didn't keep a job very long because he's, you know, had other ambitions. And so anyway, yeah, then, you know, after 15 years or whatever it would be, you know, learning from all these other horsemen and whatnot, and just general experience, then he got around Tom. And so Gene and Ray worked together in California, and they knew each other. Gene came from the same area up in Idaho originally, although Gene's a little bit older than Ray. But yeah, so Ray shared a lot of ideas about horses. I mean, took it in, not teaching, but learning. He learned a lot from a lot of different people, and just getting the exposure and the experience and everything. And I mean, that's what Tom admired when he did meet him, is this guy's got timing. He's got a lot of things working for him. He's got a lot of ability. And that's, you know, I mean, Tom said himself, you know, I mean, basically that's why he had the patience to pull Ray out of the lineup, you know, and because he had a lot of try. I mean, he'd be out there at midnight still working.
If he was a horse, he'd be one you pick.
Yeah. I mean, there was no quit in Ray.
Funny how all the good characteristics that we like in horses are also the ones that we pick in people.
Well, you know, that's something I don't know very many I can probably count them on one hand. Really good horsemen that aren't really hard workers.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a few that are talented and, just can kind of get on a horse and get it done and don't really have to. And I'm not saying you work hard on the horse, but you don't just, get up and eat a bowl of cereal at 10 o'clock and quit at 3 o'clock and ride 2 or 3 horses and get anywhere. I don't know. I mean, that's all the good horsemen I know had a tremendous work ethic.
And I like what you just said, the distinction between working hard on a horse and working hard.
Yeah.
Because I think there's sometimes a bit of a confusion between the two.
Yeah.
You're not going to get better.
You don't make the horse work hard necessarily. That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But especially if you own your own business, you're out there at 4 o'clock making sure they're all fed and watered and whatever. And you're out there at 10 o'clock, before you come to the house, maybe.
You said something about Ray that I actually think is really interesting, and I want to come back to it. You talked about how he didn't keep a job for long. He worked with a lot of different people. And it makes me wonder whether the kind of skill and timing and context and confidence and resilience and all these things that he developed, do you think that some of that was contributed by the fact that he worked with many different minds, not just one?
Well, in part, yeah. I mean, it wasn't like he was seeking going from one good horseman to another.
He was. You don't think he was?
No.
Okay.
No, I mean, I know for a fact, so-and-so's hiring over there. Come on, wife and kids. We're hungry. Let's go take that job.
Right.
But he did cross paths with a lot of good horsemen in California and Nevada.
And do you think that made him better?
Oh, definitely.
And do you think that the same applies to everybody else?
Mm-hmm.
So variety is the spice of life in horsemanship as much as in everything else.
Like Ray would always say, learn all you can from whoever you can. You can learn something from anybody, even if it's not how not to do it. And that's something I took from Ray. So you're watching these cowboys that aren't very good. And I'd watch them and say, what is getting them in trouble?
Right.
So then I get to thinking, I let my horses do that a little bit, just not that much. Or I do that to a cow a little bit, just not that much. Okay, so if it's obvious, if you go down that road far enough, that's where you end up. Why even start down that road? Find something different than, say, letting a horse go forward into the turn, pushing the cow. Okay, well, let's step that horse away from the cow before we turn. Yeah. Just whatever.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, you can apply that to, but so again, learn what not to do from people that don't do a very good job.
Well, and okay, you said something last week when you were teaching tick, and it really sat with me for a while, which was, you might have to figure this out a little bit more with this horse. You might, ruin this a little bit or not do it as well as you would for the next.
Sacrifice the horse.
Yeah. And you said that. And I remember there was a part of me that was like, oh, like, there's a part of me that wants to get it right every time and not sacrifice the current horse for the next horse. But when I think about it, like when I think of me as a young child, like those horses sacrificed so much to teach me what I learned later on, right?
Well, 2 points there. When I'm teaching at a clinic, I'm going to, okay, so tick needs more practice on whatever we're doing here, let's say.
Yeah.
And so we could do it, like throw that blanket up there once. Okay, but it's like, okay, so how's that different than, well, we never done it another time, so there's nothing to compare it to.
Right.
It worked though. So that's not really the best example, but if the horse is kind of doing it and we're kind of getting our timing, keep working at it and keep practicing until the horse just totally gives us a finger.
Yeah.
And won't do it anymore. Now, that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but my point is, if Tick can get it, even though this horse didn't end up in a good spot, Tick gained from it.
Yeah.
take someone that's here to learn.
Yeah.
Now, we didn't ruin this horse. We just didn't leave him at the best place.
Right.
Now, if it was me working that horse at home, whether it's mine or for a client, I'd quit him at the optimal place.
Right.
But we're not doing this for the horse at the clinic. We're doing it for the person. So I'm going to quit tick at an optimal place. And we can fix the horse later.
Yeah.
Well, he's still salvageable.
Yeah.
But my thought is now Tick knows how to go help the next 1,000 horses.
Yeah. It's the ripple effect.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it really sat with me because I was thinking, well, that's right. Like you have to learn all the ways not to do it.
Yeah. And
I think about this. There's so many men and women that have sat in this studio and have talked about all the things that they've done that they regret with horses. Mm-hmm. And I don't think there's one person in the horse world that can look back on what they've done with horses and not have like pits in their stomach with some of the things that they've done.
Yeah.
But I've started to understand, like, and you're talking about watching cowboys to figure out what not to do. And I have a hard time with that. I'm not going to lie. Like, I'm a sensitive being. I sometimes will watch things. I cry. I cried at Road to the Horse last year. Like a little kid, I put my sunglasses on and I was having a tough time with some of the things I was seeing. But I also knew that I needed to see them.
Yeah.
Because we need to know what not to do just as much as we need to know what to do.
I was giving a clinic in Australia in the outback to some pretty tough guys.
Yeah.
And this one guy, he'd snatch his horse, slacken the rein, snaffle bit. I'd say, you can't do that. Quit doing that. And I kept going on and on him pretty hard. We was kind of friends, so I could really dig him with the spur a little bit. And he says, "You're going to tell me you've never done that?" And I said, "Hell no, I've done it plenty. That's why I know it doesn't work. Trust me. You need to, take the slack out of the rein. You can pull them as hard as you want with the slack out of the rein, but unless you want to scare them, you can't just snatch that rein."
Yeah. What would you say to those listening to this podcast right now? What would you say to them who feel maybe some ickiness about maybe the way that they've been practicing with, maybe the way that they've been training, or maybe something they did yesterday that they're like, man, I don't think I showed up the best that I could have, or I don't think I did a very good job, or I maybe lost my temper on my horse there, or maybe I ran him too hard too long?
I would say that sounds encouraging.
Why do you say that?
Because they know they done wrong. Now, I'd much rather hear somebody confess like that than to do it and not say anything and expect that's just the way it's done. I mean, that's the guy that I was just talking about.
Yeah.
Here he's snatching them horses, and he thinks that's the way it's, that's the way it's done. That's the way Grandpa done it. That's the way everybody else does it. And I'm saying, no. Trust me, there's more productive ways to get the job done.
There's a lot of fear in the horse world at the moment. Social media changed everything for everyone, for better and for worse. There's a lot of bullying. There's a lot of really innovative people in the horse world that feel scared to even speak, right? And I feel like the more horsemen and horsewomen that I talk to that I really respect, they have the ability to have a conversation about making mistakes. Like, we have to allow ourselves to fumble through this, because let's be honest, we've been fumbling through it.
Yeah.
Like, we don't have it all figured out. We don't even know, like, look, I mean, Steve, you and Steve wrote a book about the neuroscience that supported things you were already doing, right? So much of the science is still catching up to like a lot of the things that we already do or we already knew how to do.
Well, we've been, I say we, horsemen, been around horses, my family, all the other people back in the day, they knew it worked. They just didn't know what they was doing. Right. I mean, from a scientific standpoint.
Right.
But and that's why I told Steve, why are you doing that? Because it works. You know what you're doing? No. But I know it works.
Remember the first time you found that feeling of deep connection with your horse? That moment when you knew that this was more than just a sport, more than just a hobby. It was a partnership. It was a way of life. But then things got complicated. Maybe it started with conflicting advice from trainers, or your own frustration of not making progress at the pace that you wanted. Or maybe you even started feeling afraid of your horse's behavior. Suddenly, that magic feeling, that deep connection that started to slip away. I've been in your shoes, and I know that feeling. That is why I created NF Plus. I want every horse and rider to experience that profound connection that starts with education and a strong support system. At NF Plus, we are breaking down barriers, bringing you the best training, the most helpful advice, and a community that supports you at every step of your journey. With audio and video lessons on everything from horse care to groundwork to rider psychology, NF Plus is your key to unlocking the true potential of your partnership. It's not just about looking good in the saddle or winning ribbons. It's about rediscovering why you fell in love with horses in the first place. It's about becoming a better horse person, becoming someone who has the tools to achieve the goals and find that feel that all horsemen and horsewomen aspire to have. Whether you're an experienced competitor or just starting out, we have designed NF Plus specifically to support you. Join Noel Floyd Plus today and become part of a movement that puts your relationship with your horse at the heart of everything. Because when you ride with understanding and connection, the possibilities are literally endless. Sign up today at noelfloydplus.com. That's Noel Floyd, PLUS.com. I feel like when I witness other horsemen and horsewomen doing great things, or maybe not so great things, I guess I'm curious what you think when I say, like, I hope that the horse world can, instead of like canceling each other, like, can we create more conversation about maybe some of the things that have gone wrong and how we can like come to the table to talk about it? Because I worry that we like shame people into not wanting to change.
Well, to back up a little bit, I grew up showing horses, 4-H, and then starting to go to, rein cow horse shows in high school and cuttings and blah, blah, blah. And, I was a little intimidated, a little shy, but, I just got an attitude like, you know what, if there's somebody in the grandstands that thinks they can do it better than me, get out here. And that was kind of putting my guard up, like, you're not going to intimidate me. I'm going to get out here and I'm going to do whatever it is I do, good or bad. And, I got to the point, like by the time I was in my 20s, I had all horses in town that was almost embarrassing. But I knew I wasn't going to win anything. But I wanted to get more experience in the show ring. I mean, when I say this, I'd only go to 1 or 2 shows a year.
Right.
So it's not like I'm going every weekend.
Right.
So how else am I going to get more experience? It's like the person that's going to ride twice a year.
Yeah.
To get no, I need more experience. So any of these donkeys that I could kind of keep off the fence and chase a cow, you're going to the show.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a little bit, but it's easy to have a bullseye on your back when you get out there.
Yeah, it really is.
And of course, there's always the experts up in the grandstands. Okay, but if you're so damn smart, get out here. And if you have been out here, I'm probably going to come ask you anyway. You'll probably be generous enough to give me some good advice because you've been out here and you know what it's like. And social media is the same way. There's so many experts on social media. I kind of get on there once in a while, just curious to see and I shut it off pretty fast.
Yeah.
It's like, you can tell by the way they're talking that they're just talking.
Or that they've never done it before.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Right.
They're just talking.
It's the man in the arena, the Theodore Roosevelt's speech.
Yeah. Now, there's some of them that'll get on there and say something. You can tell this guy's been there and done it.
Right.
Or this woman's been there and done it.
Yeah.
I mean, you can sort it out pretty fast.
Yeah.
But, yeah, they all just want to be heard, but they don't have anything to say. The ones that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Not the good ones.
Well, they call them keyboard warriors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then I think, if I understood you right, there's another part that you're talking about. And, we deal with a lot of environmental activists out in the ranching world out west. And, not to get into the political side of it or what, but not saying we've done everything right. But we've survived 150 years out there on the same land. And the biggest changes, I hate to say, is from climate. but it's a lot more the earth doing it to itself than what man is doing to it. I'm not talking about the mining and the obvious stuff. I'm talking about the ranching. And yet we get attacked. And, say, for example, I'm not going to put much time in on this.
Yeah.
But I'm going to relate it back to the horse world.
Awesome.
They cut grazing 50% in the last 20 years. And now we got all these, and you read about them, all these huge range fires.
Yeah. Never
existed, 50 years ago. Never heard of them. But we have to live with that. And these people they just point out the problems. They don't have a solution.
Yeah.
So back to the horse world. And you see this more in the English world, I think. I'm just on the sidelines. I'm not even showing in the cow horse much anymore. And, I'm following my grandkids around to their horse shows and rodeos, and it doesn't really exist there. It's more supportive.
Yeah.
But I think there's this, I don't know if you want to call it liberal or whatever it is, but people just want to attack the horse show world. And, I'll say there's not everything about it that I'm happy with either. But, offer a solution.
Yeah.
And as people in the horse industry, it isn't going to go away. But there's the other side of it that, let's say we're an activist and we do shut down the horse world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Shut it down completely.
Yeah.
Okay, because it's not fair to horses and whatever. Okay, where's those horses going to go?
That's what I always ask.
Where's the jobs going to go? Well, we don't care about the people. Well, how many hundreds of thousands of people don't have a job hauling horses? They don't have horses to doctor. So the vets, it's a huge industry. I'm not saying industry should dictate, but look at the big picture. And I think most of these people are doing the best they can, doing the best they know how. Now, should we change the rules? And yeah, we can talk about that. But, people say, well, there shouldn't even be horse shows. Well, people shouldn't have dogs in the house.
Right.
I think that's cruel.
Right.
I know I'm opening a big can of worms here.
Right.
But here are these hairy dogs in the winter, grow more hair.
Yeah. Huskies in California.
And they're living in the damn house.
Yeah.
That's like turning the heat up.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm not going to get on that soapbox. One person's perspective doesn't make the other person wrong.
Ooh, say that again.
One person's perspective doesn't make the other person wrong. Now, the one person they're pointing the finger at might be a lot more humane to that dog or horse or whatever it is than the person that's making all the noise, because the person that's making all the noise isn't educated. For example, this is an easy one. You know what the horse's comfort temperature is? Like ours is 70 degrees.
Yeah, it's much lower than ours, significantly
so. It's like low 40s, 42, 43, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's like when it drops from 110 to 100, you put a blanket, you put a coat on.
Yep.
Hey, we're still 30 degrees away from being comfortable.
Yep.
So when it's 60 degrees or 50 degrees and you might put a coat on, that's still like 70 or 80 or 90 degrees to the horse.
Well, and that's why I like when you say one person's perspective, because perspective is so important in this space, in the horse world.
Yeah.
Dear horse world, what is the perspective? It's like, if I've learned one, and that's so much of, I think what plagues us at the moment is that there's so many different perspectives, and it feels like, are we coming to the table to talk about it?
Well, that's, I'm interested to hear your perspective, but explain it to me.
Yeah.
And if you're going to tell me that you're going to put a blanket on your horse when it's 50 degrees because you have your jacket on.
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
The horse doesn't even want a blanket. He doesn't want anything until he's, say, below 40 degrees.
Yeah.
He wouldn't even think about it. He's just getting like, this feels good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we get into the pyrexia and the guard hairs and, they have their own coat.
Yeah.
When it gets cold, their hair stands up.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not talking about the show horse world who put blankets on them to make their coats slick and for the show. I'm talking about people that want to put a blanket on their horse to make them more comfortable because they put their jacket on. That person's uneducated.
And I think it's the, and again, I'm biased. That's what we do. We are in the business of education. But I believe that the education and the lack of education is actually one of the most cruel things you can do to your horse.
No, I mean, there's so many people in today's world. And again, going back to comparing the way we raised our horses and, the way Mustangs run is pretty much the way we run our horses. But they weren't pampered. And today's horses are pampered. And it's like they're killing them with kindness. My vet bill is almost zero. I don't have lameness problems to speak of. I don't have colic. The cribbing. A lot of the problems that you see in the stable do not exist out there.
As we wrap up, I'm going to say something that actually just came to mind as you're talking about this. And this is something we've observed on this road trip. Unexpectedly. I didn't expect to observe so many kids on this road trip because every ranch we stay at, every family that puts us up, and there's a shout out to all the people that have put us up on this trip. It's been unbelievable how hospitable. And a lot of the hospitality has come from the ranching world and from the rodeo world. A little bit more than some of the other worlds. And I was a bit surprised by that, if I'm honest. I didn't expect to observe so many kids, and I didn't expect to observe so many ranch kids. And sometimes we do compare kids to horses because there's a nature versus nurture discussion there, right? That is the same. And so not all people listening can understand what it is to raise a horse from foal to adult, but many of them might be able to relate to what it's like to raise a child. And one thing we've observed is the ranch kids who are working 10 times harder, they're up early, they're out in the cold, they got a ton of responsibility. They're amazing. Like they're so grounded and so empowered and so smart and so fun. And like, they're incredible children. And I think about the iPad generation, the generation that's very comfortable. And again, I'm not knocking the way that anyone parents, but it's an observation that I was not expecting to make, that I was comparing children who are heavily urbanized, that spend a lot of time on computers or a lot of time on iPads, compared to children who are being asked to do a lot more. They got a lot more responsibility. They're a lot tougher, they're a lot grittier. But when I spend time with both those different groups, those ranch kids, they seem happier to me. They seem more empowered, more liberated. There's something about their nervous system that seems more regulated. And I can't help but think about...
Why does this person raised in the urban areas want to go to the parks?
Yeah.
Want to take hunting trips, want to take hiking trips, just to get in touch with nature.
Yeah.
We are blessed to be raised out there. I mean, I'm on the road and I get home and it's just like, whew, not because it's home so much, it's like you see nature.
Yeah.
The plants, the animals, the whatever. I mean, you get, and I think that's why people from town, they come out there. I mean, during COVID, holy hell, we had so much traffic out there because people didn't have to go to work.
Yeah.
And they had free money. So they come out there and wander around. This one guy wandered around out in the brush. Hey, what are you doing? Well, I'm trying to get a picture of this bird. And this bird just keeps staying 200 yards ahead of me. Yeah. He's like, hey, dude, you're about 3 miles from your pickup now. I hope you look back once in a while, so when you turn around, you know where it looks like, where to go.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating, and I don't take it for granted.
Yeah.
I go to Europe and places, and it's like, you know what? These castles and churches are impressive, but after a while, it's another pile of rocks, and I can't wait to get home.
A lasting thought is, I wonder if the environment that we're in mentors us to be the horsemen that we are. Like, if we're in touch with nature, does that make us a better horseman?
Yeah. I don't know how long you want to keep talking, but I think that's something that comparing ranch kids to people that just say aren't don't grow up around animals.
Yeah, and maybe they don't have the opportunity, and we're not
It
knocking
doesn't even
that.
have to be horses.
Yeah, totally.
You know, when I was a kid, we had chickens. Well, if the chickens didn't go into roost, you herded them back in the pen.
Mm-hmm.
Just herding the chickens, you know what flight zone and balance point is.
Whoa.
You know, and if you're too fast or too slow, I mean, you learn to get in rhythm with them chickens, you just, and they go right in.
Yeah.
Well, it's no different than handling cattle. I mean, it's the same feel, and it's the same feel with the horse. So, yeah, kids like that. I mean, like my grandkids, they grew up in that environment. They get on a horse or a cow. Well, by the time they're 8 years old, they're better help just around cattle, not in their roping skills or anything, but just having a sense of where to be to hold the cattle up. They're better than a lot of people in their mid-20s I've worked around. I mean, that or have a job as a cowboy on the ranch.
Yeah.
It's like you still got to tell them. Like these kids, like, yeah, you're doing good.
Well, because you're thinking about it versus feeling into it.
It's just like learning to walk for them.
Yeah. Like
they wasn't really, I mean, when I remember growing up, you get yelled when you're in the wrong place, and if you're not getting yelled at, you must be doing it right.
Yeah.
You know, because you can't really explain, be there, because then it changes anyway. So you just it's a feel you have to learn.
Okay.
And it's hard to explain.
This is something that I'm going to like end with. So in the movie Avatar, this is like a real random.
I'm not familiar with the movie.
You haven't seen
Avatar.
it. Okay. In Avatar, I'll give you a synopsis. They're trying to like colonize a planet that has there's a lot of parallels here. Humans are trying to colonize a planet that has a lot of resources. There? Yeah, and there's other life there. Mm-hmm. And they're called the Na'vi, and they are completely in tune with their environment, completely and totally. And something that's amazing, and actually I call it like, they have these relationships with two particular species on the planet where they actually connect. They have like a neuro connection, and they have neural pathways that connect to the neural pathways of the other animal, and they sync in mind and spirit and body. The humans are coming in and they're trying to learn the ways of the Na'vi so that they can colonize the planet because it has all these resources.
Yeah. But these two that connect, one's a native and the other's a newcomer.
So the species, the Na'vi, that's how they connect. They connect with a horse-like species, and then they connect with like a flying, like a raptor-like species,
okay,
right?
But not the newcomer.
No.
Yeah, okay.
Well, we won't go down that. It's like, but
okay.
For the purpose of this story, and what I love about Avatar is like what happens in that movie is, I think, what in all intents and purposes, it's symbiosis. It's what we're all looking for as horsemen and horsewomen. It's what we're looking for with our horses, is true and utter symbiosis. And there's something that one of the characters in the movie says, which is, we have tried to teach you. We've tried to teach your people our ways, but you cannot add to an already filled cup. Mm-hmm. Meaning that the cups were already too full. There was nothing to give there. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I wonder whether we think too much. Our cup is so filled with thoughts that we forget how to feel. And that is what every great horseman and horsewoman will tell you. You know, that person's wonderful. They are great because they have great feel. Why do they have great feel? I start to feel like they have great feel because they're not thinking about it.
Mm-hmm. To a great extent, yeah.
Right. You think about it later, but
mm-hmm.
in the moment, can you be completely present with that horse? Can you be completely present in that situation? Can you observe what needs to happen and not think about what needs to happen, but can you feel what needs to happen?
So I got one story on Tom Dorrance.
Great.
That's kind of in this, of course, I'd just somehow get around him at least once a year, even when I was in Nevada and he's in California.
Yeah.
So that was just part of my Christmas vacation or whatever you want to call it, but I'd pull up and go there. And I went to see him one time, and I had a horse that I wasn't totally wrecked, but he was a rehab horse basically, and he's coming along, but there was still some places there that I wasn't making the kind of progress that I would have liked.
Yeah.
I would like more progress.
Yeah.
Hurry up, let's go.
Yeah.
And so Tommy, he watched me for a little bit with this horse, and I kind of done some different maneuvers. And what do you think? And he says, well, he looks pretty good. Just keep doing what you're doing. I'm thinking, I drove this far. and went out of my way this far. I do not want to hear, don't do anything different. I want to hear, what can I do different? And, I drove home and I was pissed. I was really pissed at him. And for quite a while, I'd still go see him, but I wouldn't take a horse. And it hurt my feelings at first. But what I learned from that, and I knew he'd done it on purpose, but I knew he wouldn't hurt my feelings on purpose.
Oh.
He'd been telling me for a long time, just, you need to slow down. Slow down, cut it in half. I ain't got time to cut it in half, we need to make it happen.
Yeah.
And I struggled with that for a long time. Yeah, hardworking mentality.
Yeah.
And finally, took quite a while. I got over kind of pouting about it. And I thought, you know what? Maybe what he was trying to tell me, and this is quit looking to him for answers and start looking to the horse. Because he was getting older and he'd been pounding me for decades and he's still telling me the same thing. It's like, all right, I need to start looking to the horse for the answers. And of course, I had to get pretty humble with the horse instead of telling him what to do. All right, let me ask some questions here. It totally changed the way I looked at horses. So when you say, what did Tom Dorrance get me? That's the biggest thing. He gave me a lot of tools. He used a rope and this and the flag and this, that, and the other. But that changed my horsemanship more than anything. And it's kind of like what you're talking about.
You're going to make me cry.
Yeah. Quit thinking so much.
Yeah.
And just learn to feel.
Ask.
Mm-hmm.
Ask rather than tell. Martin, it's blowing my brain right now. Okay. I have these rapid fire questions that I wrap every single episode with, and I'm really excited to hear yours. If you could read one book to the horse world, what would it be?
Evidence-based horsemanship, of course.
I was like reading the question going, I kind of have a feeling I know the answer to this one. Who is the most iconic horse in history?
Well, I'd take that on a personal basis, and I've had 4 or 5 that I think are pretty special. Now, I know you'd like to say Secretariat or Seabiscuit or, the audience would, maybe.
Maybe.
But I don't know them horses that well. I don't know what made them up other than hearsay. But of the horses that I know, we have that relationship. And even the other horses, I've seen, Melvin and Bill and Ray, and they had some awesome horses.
Yeah.
But, and I rode some of them. I felt some of them.
Yeah.
And they were awesome. I rode raised bridle horses. And they're awesome. It made me want that feel in my horses.
Yeah.
But my horses that felt anything like that was a way bigger
deal
to me than Secretariat or Seabiscuit or...
Name one.
Well, the first one would be White Eye.
White Eye.
White Eye. Yeah. And he's actually a full brother to Popsicle that was later one of my awesome horses.
I love these names.
And they were the same breeding as all these old broodmares that I still have descendants of.
That must mean a lot more.
Yeah.
Most undervalued skill as a rider.
Undervalued skill. I wish you'd let me sleep on these questions.
They're rapid fire. You got to answer just the first thing that comes to your mind.
Undervalued skill. Probably timing. Feel and timing. We want to pull on them. We want to drag them around. People, I don't think the horse can really feel your seat bones. And not your seat bones directly, indirectly.
Yeah.
Especially in a Western saddle. When I load this seat bone, this whole side of my saddle gets heavier.
Yeah.
That is so obvious to the horse.
Yeah.
So obvious. Now, you can teach the horse to do whatever with that. But you don't have to shift your weight very much. And now your saddle's 10 pounds heavier on this side than it is this side. Put your leg into them 10 pounds. Put 10 pounds on the rein. That's huge.
Yeah.
So my point is you could just shift your weight the slightest bit, and the horse feels it. Now, what does it mean? Nothing to most horses. But that's a big part of what I develop in my horses is I shift my weight forward, back, right, and left. And then I reinforce it with a leg or rein. And pretty quick, they're operating off my weight something more than pulling on them and spurring them.
Right.
Now, that isn't to say that I can't just kind of go neutral here and bend over here and open a gate or turn around, put a coat on or something like that. But there's no rhythm with my hands and legs when I do that.
Yeah.
But when we're dancing and everything's in rhythm, my weight's probably the thing. My weight is the thing that I want to get the most response from.
Well, and this book talks about how quick horses are to establish patterns. So the patterns you've built around a weight shift.
So next month's virtual clinic with Dr. Peters, EBH virtual clinic, we're talking about rhythm and getting synchronized with the horse. And that's what this is. Instead of, banging them around and jerking and pulling and everything, just refining it down to, shift your weight, barely turn your toe out, barely move that rein, and the horse feels that and stays in rhythm with that. What always amazes me is you look at these birds during migration, and there's thousands of them. They almost black the sky.
Yeah.
Or schools of fish, which I don't see a lot of that except on television. But here they're however wide, and there's how many hundreds or thousands or whatever, and they all turn left and they all turn right.
Yeah.
Who says left turn?
Good question.
Where's the bird that says left turn, everybody? I mean, how do they know that?
Yeah.
But horses, they run and they do this and that, and the faster they go, the more they stay in sync. When they're slow, they might kind of wander around and graze a little bit. It's so easy for them to be synchronized. That's part of their self-preservation.
Totally.
I mean, that is way more important to them than it is to people, I think. So I think that's a huge thing, and that's kind of what I'm talking about. And this is something I've kind of been messing with for quite a while. We say field timing and balance. That can be defined 50 different ways.
Right.
I could define it 50 different ways.
Yeah.
People think timing with the feet. Well, yeah, that's part of it. But timing with the thought. Timing, I mean, I could list at least 25 different things that I'm looking at timing with. But, when do I shift my weight? When the horse is looking this way or the horse is looking that way. I mean, there's so many things like that. But anyway, the rhythm and being synchronized, and that's a whole nother conversation.
That's another podcast.
That we're going to talk, Steve and I are going to talk about next.
Last two questions. Who is the greatest horseman in history?
In my history?
Yeah, in your opinion.
Well, there would be three.
Okay.
And first I'll tell you why. Okay. There's three of my mentors that if they did get a horse scared, it was very calculated. But it's not like their horses stayed scared very long. And, they got no thrill out of, I say torture, but in the slightest bit, just teasing, a stray cat or anything. If something needed put down, maybe they could shoot it, but they got no pleasure out of like talking bad about people. Yep. I'll share a story in a minute, but they were just kind people, but kind to horses and people.
Yeah.
And of course, one was Tom Dorrance and Gene Lewis. Gene Lewis, we never did talk about him.
I know.
But Gene Lewis, I would say, was as much like Tom as anybody else I was around, and my uncle Paul Black.
Oh, cool.
He would fit in that category too. And, he's an unknown, but he's responsible for a lot of good horsemen, mentoring a lot of good horsemen in our neck of the woods. Melvin Jones, I mean, there's a long list, but he was very humble. He never wanted credit for it. They wanted to put him in the Buckaroo Hall of Fame in Winnemucca, and he says, no.
Oh, wow.
Won't do it.
Why?
Because he didn't want recognition.
Oh, interesting.
I said something, Tom Marvel said something about Paul Black winning the Open Bridle Class at Elko, which is back in those days, was a big deal.
Yeah.
I thought, I never heard of him even showing a horse, let alone, having the champion horse at a big show like that. I thought, Tom must be confused. So a little while later, I asked his daughter. I said, because Paul was dead by then. I asked his daughter, and she says, oh, yeah, we had to go to them damn horse shows, and it's hot and dusty. And yeah, he won stuff, and he'd go to rodeos and win ropes. I didn't even know he competed in anything because he never talked about it.
Interesting that.
Yeah.
Okay, last question.
Okay.
Mares, stallions, or geldings?
From a training standpoint, for the most part, I don't find mares riding any different than geldings.
Okay.
Just from a training standpoint. I can start a bunch of fillies, a bunch of mares. Now, obviously, you'll have some fillies that show hormonal signs. And that's something about range horses don't show that hardly ever.
Oh, interesting.
You get in horses that are confined and overfed, you run into that a lot more.
Oh, interesting.
I've done enough of them that, when I go back and do those race horses, you run into that pretty regular. But ranch horses out there that just kind of self-regulate, no. Stallions, now obviously in the spring of the year, their testosterone is going to be working, and they can be different. The rest of the year, my breeding stallion is sitting around the manger with a bunch of geldings right now. And guess who keeps who in line? The geldings keep the stallion in line.
Really?
Yes.
No way.
Oh, yeah. Stallions can be just like geldings if you keep their testosterone in check. Now, nature is going to bring that testosterone up come spring.
Right.
So it's going to be more challenging. And that stallion's probably going to knock the heck out of the geldings in the spring, especially if there's mares in there.
Right.
And I don't put my stallion with mares in the winter and expect them to get along with geldings. But just for various reasons, I got a handful of geldings and a stallion at the house. Mainly because I can turn all the rest of the horses out in this big country.
Yeah.
And the mares and the geldings and the foals and just the whole rest of the herd can be together down there. And I only have 2 herds to take care of.
And then the boys are close to home.
Yeah.
Nice.
But yeah, that's a.
So you don't have a preference, it sounds like.
Well, I would rather have geldings. Like all the old ranches had geldings. Because if you put a mare out there that is a little hormonal, some of the geldings will get stupid. And especially like in my deal where clients bring horses in, and we just turn them out in the field with mine.
Yeah.
They get along. But if you got 3 mares out there, you're probably going to have to go wrangle 3 different bunches of horses.
Right.
Now, you could put 3 different, you bring 2 or 3, and he brings 2 or 3, and they kick them out. Yours might go to one corner, it still might happen just because they're not familiar with each other. My horses snarl at your horses and make them leave. But it's going to be more so with mares.
Yeah.
And so that for that reason, all the old ranches only rode geldings, in my neck of the woods at least. And so I grew up only riding geldings, and I understand why. And if I had all the geldings I needed, I wouldn't ride mares. I wouldn't have them in the cabbie, in the saddle horse bunch.
Martin, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. There's not a lot of, I can't really put into the words, but been such a pleasure.